Hello and thank you for joining us for this special channel webinar. Today we'll be discussing an introduction to Jamf Now. My name is Veronica and I'm the Business Development Manager for our Jamf Now solution. Quick agenda as to what we'll be going over today. We'll talk a little bit about Jamf, who we are, what our focus is. Then we'll talk a little bit about how MDM can help solve some common business problems that you might face as you deploy your Apple technology. We'll talk a little bit about Jamf Now, and then we'll hop into a demonstration to give you a full view into how you can leverage Jamf Now for your deployment. We'll end on some next steps so you know exactly who to reach out to ensure that you can deploy Jamf Now easily. So for those of you that are new to Jamf, Jamf has been around since 2002. We've been in the MDM space for quite some time. We offer specifically mobile device management for Apple devices. So we do have a focus on Apple. And the reason for that is we want to deliver the best experience for you as the person managing these devices, as well as for your end users, to ensure that if a new Apple operating system is released, that Jamf Now is compatible with that new operating system on day of. We call that 0-day support here at Jamf. And so your end users can take advantage of all the new Memoji features that iOS 12 might offer. And you can rest assured that your devices are always in communication with Jamf. Besides that, you know that when you talk to support here at the Jamf team, that you're talking to folks that know Apple's in and outs. We know Apple technology really, really well. And so we're here to help offer some great advice for how you can manage your devices, how you can deploy apps, and a couple of the other things that we'll talk about today. So Jamf Now, the star of today's webinar, is our small to medium business solution. So it's focused specifically on someone who might not have an IT background. So for folks that might be new to MDM, folks that don't need all the bells and whistles of what an enterprise solution might offer, this solution is perfect for you. We've taken all the components of MDM and simplified them as much as we can to focus on features that small to medium businesses might need. So we want to make sure that no matter how big or small your business is, that you have a way to effectively manage your devices and keep them secure. So talking through a couple of common business problems that folks face when they actually push out Apple devices to their end users. One is inventory. So if you're currently managing your inventory on an Excel spreadsheet, there is a better way. Jamf Now, when devices are enrolled, will collect inventory information for you and keep it up to date on a 24-hour basis. So you have one single location where you can go to get the most up-to-date information about your devices, whether that's about the operating system, capacity, or any notes that you might want to add in there. The second one is around saving time when it comes to configuring those devices. Standard workflow might be that you order a device from your reseller. You get that device shipped into your location, and you, as the person managing those technologies, open the box, go through the setup assistant, and then download the apps, configure the email, configure Wi-Fi, all manually. And so there is a better way. Jamf Now can help you configure all of those things over the air and for a group of devices. That way, all you have to do is manage stuff in Jamf Now. Jamf Now will take care of configuring things for you. The next one is around activation lock bypass. This is a feature that Apple introduced with iOS 7, and it was really meant as an anti-theft piece of software for you and me as consumers. So when we get our devices, we log in with our Apple ID. This activation lock feature ensures that if a device was ever lost or stolen, that whoever picks it up would need my original Apple ID and password to actually configure the device again. And so if it's wiped clean, the third or fourth screen is going to require my Apple ID and password. It's a great feature for consumers, making sure that your data stays safe and that the device is pretty much useless if it's ever lost or stolen. In a business setting, it's a little bit more complicated. We'll talk through how Jamf Now can help you disassociate Apple IDs from an employee after they left the company, making sure that you can remove that Apple ID from that device and you can reassign it to a new user. The next one here is around encryption or security, ensuring that as those devices are accessing your corporate data, that you maintain some sort of security and encryption across those devices. And so Jamf Now will help you enforce File Vault 2 encryption policies for your Macs and set some security settings for both your iOS and macOS devices, including passcode policies and maybe some restrictions that you might want to set, which is our next point here, around iOS restrictions specifically. So there's a ton of things that you can do to really curate the experience that you want on the devices. Perhaps your devices and your specific use case might be a kiosk mode where you don't want people personalizing devices, and these devices really serve a single purpose. And so we'll talk through the many restrictions that are available to you here in Jamf Now for both your iOS and macOS devices. The last one is around helping you save time and money when it comes to app distribution. And so we'll talk a little bit about the different programs that come into play here. But the last thing that we want to have you do is either use a single Apple ID on a range of devices and then you experience some synchronization issues. Another popular workflow is creating unique Apple IDs per device that only you know the password to. But then this continues to become an issue if you need to update an app or if you need to push a new app to the device. And so we'll talk to you a little bit about how Jamf Now can help you get apps on devices over the air. You also have the option to assign those apps to someone's personal Apple ID or to the device itself. That way there is no need for an Apple ID. Now, there are some key components of MDM that really help you set up for success in the long run. And so one service that you'll notice in Jamf Now is something called Apple Push Notification Service, APNS for short. This is how any piece of software is able to communicate with the devices over the air. So when you think about getting an Apple Watch notification from ESPN or an Apple News notification to your iPhone, all of that information is being pushed over APNS. This ensures that any command or any sort of notification that your devices receive is coming from a secured and trusted source. And so before you enroll devices, ensure that you've connected APNS. The other key component here, and what's really going to help you save a lot of time, is around Apple Business Manager. This is a free program that's offered that your reseller can help you sign up for. But what Apple Business Manager does is it takes two key components of mobile device management and merges them into a single portal for your use. The first one here is around automated MDM enrollment, previously known as the Device Enrollment Program. The second one here is around Volume Apps and Books, previously known as Volume Purchase Program. So let's talk a little bit in more detail as to why automated MDM enrollment with Apple Business Manager is really a best practice. There's a couple of things that automated MDM enrollment grants you. The first is in the name, right? Out of the box enrollment. So when you purchase those devices from your preferred reseller and you get them shipped to your office or to any location, those devices will be enrolled automatically out of the box. So all you have to do is open the box, connect to Wi-Fi, and Jamf takes over. The second piece here is ensuring that there is a non-removable MDM profile on that device. And what that means is no matter how tech-savvy your users are, they won't be able to disassociate that device from Jamf Now. So that profile that lives on there, they actually won't be able to get it removed there. The last thing that you get here is around wireless supervision, specifically around your iOS devices. And so let's talk a little bit more about what Supervision is. And Supervision is a mode that allows an MDM solution to control additional functions on an iOS device. This feature is intended for institutionally owned devices. And what this means is that there are some things that you can and cannot do on specific devices based on their supervised status. There is a way to manually supervise a device. You can do so by connecting that iOS device to a Mac and using a free Mac app called Apple Configurator 2. Now that sounds like a ton of work and some time that you'll need to put into doing that. When you implement automated MDM enrollment, the supervision feature is automatically turned on for you. So as soon as the device is connected to Jamf, you'll be able to take advantage of all the great features that it offers. Now let's go ahead and hop into a demonstration. For those of you that like to follow along, I'm actually just going to head into our live demo instance. And for those of you that would like to click around, maybe try out Jamf Now with actually signing up for an account, this try the demo link down at the bottom is available to you at login.jamfcloud.com. And so Jamf Now is completely cloud-based, which means you can access your Jamf Now account from anywhere, any device, doesn't matter. You just have to log in via a web browser that's supported. And so the first thing that we see here is our dashboard. This is going to give us a quick view as to the status of our devices. And so you can see here that I've got some iPads, some iPods, iPhones with a few names, and we'll go through those details in a bit. But we do have some filter options here, so if maybe you just want to see your iOS devices that have been auto-enrolled, you can quickly filter those out. We've also got different list views, so for those of you that have tons of devices and it might be easier for you to see in a list view, you can always swap back and forth very easily. Lastly, for those of us that do need our inventory data in an Excel spreadsheet for auditing purposes, or for another department, you can easily download as a CSV file straight from the dashboard. And so why don't we take a look at a specific inventory record. I'm going to choose here our Grace iPad mini. So a couple of things you'll see here on the screen. This is going to be your inventory record. And so it gives you an idea as to who this device has been assigned to. If, for example, Grace leaves the company, you can easily reassign this to a new person. Make sure that they have access to that email. So really, really simple. It'll also let you know what blueprint has been applied, whether or not your settings have been successfully applied. But beyond that, you'll get access to standard inventory information. That way you don't need to track your inventory in an Excel spreadsheet. Devices check in with Jamf every 24 hours, so you'll have a pretty good idea as to the status of that device. So we'll collect things like serial number. You actually have a quick link to check the warranty coverage with AppleCare. So if you want to quickly find out if this device is covered, you can just click here and it'll send you to apple.com to find that. You can also add information that might be relevant for your company specifically. So if you guys use asset tags, or maybe you want to keep track of the purchase date for leasing purposes, you can go ahead and edit those fields. But we'll also collect things like operating system version and capacity. So if you run into any sort of troubleshooting issues, you can at least identify if it's because the device is full or if it's on the wrong operating system. Now, one other feature I'd like to cover is this feature called Activation Lock. This was something that Apple introduced with iOS 7, and it was really meant as an anti-theft piece of software for you and me as consumers. So when I get my new iPhone, I log in with my Apple ID and find my iPhone is automatically turned on. This actually permanently links that serial number to my Apple ID and password when Find My iPhone is turned on. So if I ever misplace my device and someone picks it up and wipes it clean, they'll end up hitting a wall during the setup screens that says, hey, this device belongs to Veronica. I'm going to need the original Apple ID and password to continue along the setup screens. And so that's great for me as a consumer because I know that my data is safe and no one can use that device at that point. But for businesses, it can become quite cumbersome, especially if you're letting folks use their personal Apple ID and allow some sort of personal use on these iOS devices. But Apple recognized that, and they actually allow us to generate what we call a bypass code. So in the scenario that, let's say, Grace left the company, but her Apple ID is still on that device, all you'll have to do is wipe it clean. When you reach that wall that says, hey, where's Grace? You'll actually leave the Apple ID field empty, so you don't even need to know the email. You'll then type this into the password field and hit next, and it'll take care of disassociating that Apple ID from that device. Now, if you've ever run into Activation Lock before, typically you'd have to create a Genius Bar appointment at your local Apple store and provide original proof of purchase to be able to remove that Apple ID from that device. Now, that, of course, takes time. This hopefully will save you just a little bit of time. Now, in terms of Activation Lock and how we're able to generate that bypass code for you, one thing that is required is Supervision for Activation Lock and a few other features that we'll go over here in the webinar. But Supervision simply means that Apple will recognize that device as corporate owned. It belongs to Jamf and not to Veronica, and so it unlocks an additional layer of management capability that allows me to restrict certain things that I might not be able to on a non-supervised device. So best practice is Apple Business Manager. If you haven't signed up yet, please work with your preferred reseller to get that up and running to ensure devices that you purchased are good to go. Now, one other feature that does require supervision is something called lost mode. This is something that allows us to track the location of a lost or stolen device. So if Grace says, "Hey Veronica, I've misplaced my device," I can go into Jamf Now and add a custom message here so it's displayed on the screen. I can even play a sound to devices that are running iOS 10.3 or higher. So if it's stuck between couch cushions or under the car seat, you'll at least be able to hear it. But when I hit enable on this device, that device is going to get locked down to the point where no one can access that data. So you know that your corporate data is safe. It will also collect the location of that device, given that it's still connected to a network. So when this is assigned to box, that will change and update with the location of that device for you. So a great feature there, available to our supervised iOS devices. But beyond that, we do have some other remote commands that are available to any device, no matter their status. The first here is unlock. This is one of my favorite features where you can remove an unknown passcode on a device. So if someone forgets that 4-digit to 6-digit passcode on their iPhone, no need to head over to the Apple Store or wipe that device clean. You can just go ahead and send it an unlock command, and that user will have 60 minutes to add a new passcode that they hopefully won't forget. Now, if you've misplaced a device and you know you're probably never going to find it, you can just go ahead and wipe it clean to protect that data. So you can absolutely push a remote wipe command to remove that corporate data. Now, if you know where that device is and you just simply want to protect it behind the passcode, maybe I entered the passcode and left it at a coffee shop. I don't want anyone being able to access that data. So I can add a custom message here that says, "Hey, call this number if found," but it'll ensure that that passcode is required. One last remote command I'd like to share with you here is the ability to push iOS updates remotely. This requires automated MDM enrollment through Apple Business Manager. So this is the only feature that is unique to automated MDM enrollment. But if you want to ensure that all your users have the most up-to-date software, you can go ahead and push that update here with Jamf Now. Cool, now that's our iOS inventory record. Let's quickly take a look at what a Mac inventory record looks like. Much of the same here. You can notice that this one tells us that the security is out of date on this device. So with that quick view, I'm able to identify that. But again, I can assign devices easily to locations or workstations and keep track of that. I've also got that serial number with warranty check here as well. You also have the ability to push File Vault 2 on your Macs using Jamf Now. And so you'll notice that this has File Vault 2 enabled. One thing that happens when you push File Vault with Jamf Now is a decryption key that's collected for you, much like activation lock bypass. Looks like this one doesn't have it, so I'm just going to head back, take a look at our Office MacBook Air to show you what that looks like. So you'll notice now that we have the recovery key available to us. And so this is useful to decrypt the drive, maybe after a user has left. You can even use it to reset a device password. So if someone has forgotten the password to their Mac, you can leverage this File Vault 2 recovery key to reset that password. So serves twofold here. Encryption goes ahead and protects that data for you should a Mac be misplaced. And then you can, of course, use that to reset a password. In terms of remote commands on our Mac OS devices, I can go ahead and lock a device. This one's a little bit different. It does require a 6-digit PIN. Please be aware that Jamf Now does not store this PIN, so be sure to write it down or remember it, as it will be required to unlock that Mac. And so I can just ensure that if a Mac has been misplaced, that no one can access it. Similarly, I can go ahead and wipe it clean completely. So if a Mac has been lost, again, it will require that 6-digit PIN. So if anybody picks it up, they won't be able to access the Mac at all without that PIN. Remember, this PIN is not stored in Jamf Now, so be sure to write that down if you need to. Perfect. Now, how are we able to configure all of these devices with all of the settings and apps that they need? In Jamf Now, that all works through a blueprint, and this simply serves as a recipe of settings per groups of devices based on what purpose they serve. And so you can create different use cases, different scenarios, or different blueprints for different roles in the organization, whatever makes sense for you. So if we take a look at a specific blueprint here, the first thing I can do is push the applications that I need for this specific group of devices. And so app deployments in Jamf Now all work through Apple Business Manager. Similarly to auto enrollment, Apple Business Manager allows you to purchase apps in volume. So for those devices that we need to push apps to, we would link our Apple Business Manager account, and we actually have the ability to push apps in two different ways. So depending on what makes sense for your organization, you could decide to allow personal use on these corporate-owned devices. Folks tend to take care of devices a little bit more when they feel like it's theirs, so no downside here, especially if your devices are auto-enrolled through Apple Business Manager. You will be able to remove a personal Apple ID if you were in that scenario. But you could go ahead and push an app directly to someone's personal Apple ID, and what you're doing with Jamf Now here is temporarily assigning a license of that app to that user so they can use it while they're with the company. If they were to ever leave the company, you can use Jamf Now to pull that license back, so you can go ahead and reassign it to a new user. No loss of property, no loss of software in that sense. This is great because volume purchasing allows you to maintain ownership over apps. One of the most common scenarios we hear is a customer is either reimbursing users for apps that they've purchased, but when they leave the company, they walk away with that property. Some other popular methods of deploying apps, because that Apple ID is necessary, is either creating unique Apple IDs per device, but at that point, you're just managing Apple IDs and passwords, or they try to share one Apple ID across a range of devices, but then they run into synchronization issues. And so another best practice here for a shared use environment where you might not want any sort of personalization is the ability to deploy apps to a device directly without the need for an Apple ID. So this is huge. That way you can ensure that no matter who picks up that device, that it has all of the apps that it needs. And so these features are available to you with volume purchasing through Apple Business Manager. One last thing I'll say is you can automatically update apps through Jamf Now. If you want to make sure that those apps are always up to date, just check the box and hit save. Jamf Now will take care of updating that the moment those apps are deployed to the App Store. So within our blueprint, any apps that I've purchased will show up in my Add Apps menu here. So I can go ahead and select a number of applications to add to this blueprint. Once I add that, any devices that are enrolled or will enroll will receive these applications. Nothing else that you'd need to do. Next thing I can do here is add a web clip. This is simply taking a website and making it look like an app on the home screen. So if you want easier access to specific programs that might be web-based, this is really, really useful. Now past that, because these devices are accessing all sorts of corporate data, we want to make sure that they're secure. And so you can go in here and require a passcode. This one's pretty nice because it does not allow the user to remove the passcode. This will ensure that the devices are always protected behind that. Beyond that, if you want to ensure that folks aren't using simple passwords like 1234 or 9999, you can go in here and require some sort of complexity. If you want it to be something with alphanumeric, or maybe you don't want any repeating characters, you can dictate that. You can even change the length that you prefer and a passcode age. So if you have turnover happening often in your industry, you could go ahead and make sure that those devices change passwords every 3 months. We've got some auto lock options here as well. But for those of us leveraging Mac OS devices, this is where you'd want to turn on File Vault 2 so we can collect that recovery key, and you can use it to reset passwords if you're ever in that scenario. Next is email. Typically, you'd have to head into the device itself, add this mail server information manually to then configure that work email to that device. But no more. You can actually pre-configure some of those settings here with Jamf Now. So I can add some of that Office 365 information here so that all my users need to know are their email and passwords to configure that to the device. Now, if you're leveraging auto enrollment, you can take that one step further, and before the device is even turned on, you can pre-assign it with its appropriate email. So all Jane would need to know is her password once she opens that mail app, hopefully saving everyone just a little bit more time. Same goes with Wi-Fi. This is a nice, secure way to ensure that your users can always connect to the Wi-Fi network. Now, as long as you have this set to auto join, this one's pretty cool. As long as the device is within range of that network, it will simply join the Wi-Fi network. There's nothing the user needs to do. No passwords need to be shared on a whiteboard in a public space, not super secure. Jamf Now will take care of making sure those devices are able to connect. So you can go in here and make those changes pretty easily. Now, the bulk of what's possible here within a blueprint is going to live under restrictions. And the whole point of this is to make sure our data stays safe and make sure that our employees stay on task. And so the restrictions here are broken down by category. We won't go over all restrictions. There's about 75 different restrictions you can turn on or off here. So we'll go over some of the major restrictions that are sought after. One thing you'll notice here is that every restriction has a description, and some do require supervision. So this is where you want to keep in mind, if some of these features are very important to you, then Apple Business Manager will definitely make your life just a little bit easier. But for example, if you don't want people installing apps from the App Store, you can actually remove the App Store from the home screen, so that the only apps that these devices get are the ones that you give them through this blueprint. Similarly, if you don't want people deleting apps that you've configured to perfection for work purposes, you can go ahead and kind of make them permanent on that device. There's some other native features that you can disable, like the camera. Maybe you're in a research facility and you don't want anyone taking photos. You can also disable Safari, so if you don't want people blindly surfing the web while they're working, you can go ahead and disable that as well. Some other native apps here, you can go ahead and turn them all off. So if you want to clean off that home screen and make it look as clean as possible, you can go ahead and remove anything that you might not need access to. Moving on to security and privacy, for those of you that are deploying email accounts with Jamf Now, we highly suggest turning on managed app data segregation. What this does is contain work data to work-specific apps. So me as an employee, I can't take a customer list from my work email and save it to a personal Dropbox app, because this restriction contains that data to ensure that I can't take corporate data and save it to personal apps. Well, for those of us in the healthcare industry or maybe in the retail space, we might not want folks taking photos of anything that's on the screen at any given moment through a screenshot, so I can go ahead and disable that feature. You also have the ability to ensure that no one wipes a device clean locally. So if you want to disable erasing all content and settings so that only you have the power to wipe that device clean, you can go ahead and turn on that restriction as well. We've got some other more advanced features, but this one is pretty cool, where you can prevent changes to the passcode. So if you are in a shared use environment like a restaurant, for example, and you just want to make sure those passwords are uniform across all the devices, you can set that passcode and then add this restriction here so that folks can't change it. Cool, lots of restrictions here, but moving on to network and cellular data, we've got a few different options here. You can disable personal VPN configuration. That way folks aren't bypassing any sort of network restrictions that you might have. Also, if you don't want people connecting to unsecure Wi-Fi networks, you can go ahead and whitelist Wi-Fi networks. That way the only ones they can connect to are the ones that you've configured through Jamf Now. Now, if you decide to allow some sort of personal use, but you do want a clear wall between that personal and that corporate data, you can go ahead and disable some syncing options with iCloud to ensure that none of our corporate data syncs over to that personal iCloud account. You got some options for Siri here. If you want to manipulate that, you can. Now, one popular restriction here is preventing changes to accounts. What this does is ensure that users cannot personalize the device in any way. This restriction does require supervision, but it actually doesn't allow anyone to add a personal email account or maybe a personal Apple ID to that device. Those options will be grayed out, and so you can achieve a true shared use scenario. Finally, if you decide to add a custom wallpaper, maybe you want to add your corporate logo to that home screen, you can actually prevent changes to that wallpaper here. Supervision is required. This last feature is popular for those of us that might be using custom software. So if you want to test against Apple's new operating systems to ensure that your apps are ready for that, you can actually delay software updates for up to 90 days to make sure that users can't update on the device itself until you've tested against all your software. Last feature here is single app mode. This allows us to achieve a true kiosk feel. So this will let me lock a device into a single application. So no matter how many times I hit the home button, I won't be able to leave that app. I've also got some hardware features here as well. So if you're playing a video, you don't want the volume to go down, you can go ahead and disable that. Cool. Now, once we've set up all our blueprints, we have to get our devices into Jamf Now. So let's take a look at how we do that. The first is manually, and this is popular for pre-owned devices, but I can enable open enrollment, which will allow users to enroll using a URL. So what you would do is add an access code for security reasons, and then you would share your specific open enrollment link with your end users so they can add their devices to Jamf Now and gain access to all of their work apps and email. Now, for example, I'm going to go ahead and head into an open enrollment page here. You'll notice that access code is prompted for. Next thing you'll notice is because this blueprint has an email configured, it then asks me for my email. So this is where I'll be able to type it in so that it configures it for me. And then I'll type in my name so my IT manager knows exactly who has what. But once I click Start Enrollment, it's going to take me out of Safari and put me into settings to install that MDM profile. Once that's done, everything in my blueprint will start to apply to that device. Now, one piece of information here is that all devices enrolled via open enrollment will allow the user to remove that MDM profile. There will be a remove button if that user is able to navigate to that MDM profile menu in settings. Now, the only way to avoid that, of course, is through auto enrollment. So for those of you leveraging Apple Business Manager, anytime you purchase a new device, those devices will sync here with Jamf Now and appear in this menu for you to pre-assign. So before that device is turned on, you want to make sure that it's here in your Jamf Now menu. You can then assign it to a specific person, and you can assign it to its blueprint so that once it turns on, it knows exactly what settings to get. But let's take a look at what that looks like. So I've got my iPad up here on the screen. This is a device I've turned on for the very first time. And I've already connected to Wi-Fi and selected my language, so I'm at this Apps and Data screen. And this is where the magic happens. When I hit Setup as New, this device checks in with Apple, and Apple says, oh, you belong to Jamf. We're going to go ahead and configure your device for you. And so when I hit Next, that device will check in with Jamf to find the blueprint that it'll start to apply. So I'm going to skip over some of these settings here. We'll see what happens in a little bit. In this scenario, there's no need for me to use an Apple ID, so I'm going to click the Forgot and then Set Up Later. And once I get to the home screen, we'll notice some changes here on that device. Perfect. And so you already see here that I've got a web clip configured. Here are my passcode requirements coming in. My restrictions have applied. My wallpaper has also applied. And so this is a great way to ensure that users really don't need to do much to configure devices with all of the work-specific things that they might need. One last thing I want to show you here, and those are those apps coming in. You saw that I didn't need to log in with an Apple ID. But when I head into settings, I want to show you where that profile lives and show you that here it is non-removable when it comes to automated MDM enrollment. So under the general screen, you'll notice device management, and here's that profile, but no remove button available for me here. So profile is pretty much permanent. If I wipe this device clean, we'll just run it through the setup steps again. It'll check in with Apple and re-enroll itself into Jamf. So really a best practice here to ensure that your devices are supervised and always in communication with Jamf. Cool. That brings us to the end of the presentation here. Last thing I'll say is if you are interested in giving Jamf Now a try, you can go ahead and sign up with your preferred reseller. They'll send you that sign up link so you can go ahead and create your account. Jamf Now gives you 3 devices to enroll for free forever, so you'll never get charged for them. Once you reach that 4th device, it's $2 per device per month, and you can purchase licenses with your preferred reseller. Now, one last thing I'll say is we do offer an additional tier of Jamf Now called Jamf Now Plus, which allows us to deploy custom software. So for those of us that might have an in-house built iOS app, or maybe a macOS app that's not available in the App Store, we could leverage Jamf Now Plus to deploy those custom IPA or PKG files. If you are interested in Jamf Now Plus, you can head to the menu down at the bottom under Account, and you can upgrade your account by switching to Plus. If you are interested in that, that would be $4 per device per month, and again, something that you can purchase with your preferred reseller. But just to quickly recap and give you some next steps, if you are interested in taking a look at Jamf Now, please connect with your Apple reseller. Apply for Apple Business Manager as early as you can to ensure that as you purchase new devices, they are linked to that account. You can take advantage of all the great features that Supervision offers. Go ahead and sign up for a Jamf Now account, give it a try, enroll a device or two to make sure that it's a great fit. And if you do have any questions at all, you're welcome to email our sales team at jamfnow.sales@jamf.com. But thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed our webinar. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or to your preferred reseller. Have a great day.